Collect what you want, what you like, how you like, but just collect.
What's up, wrestling fans, trading card collectors? Welcome to another episode of Wrestling with Cards. I'm your host, Zhan. You can check me out all over social platforms. Speaking of social platforms, this guy's got a good one. My interview today features Chuckster, one of the OG wrestling card collectors. You can find Chuckster on Twitter. Link to his profile is in the show notes. This is a guy you're not going to see flashing PSA 10 slabs of Hogan or The Rock. This also isn't a guy you're going to see with 30, 40, 50 copies of 82, 83 All-Stars or Rock trivia cards. But if there's a wrestling card out there, this guy probably has it. Chuckster brings to light wrestling history and so many facts about these specific wrestling cards, and even some wrestling cards that people didn't even know existed. We get into a lot of topics such as how he's a set collector over everything else, how to store the collections when you have, 300 plus sets of wrestling cards, and the future of the hobby, and just some other fun historic wrestling information. So grab something to take some notes with, because you're going to learn a lot of things about history of wrestling cards and sets in this video. But before we get into that, just a few quick show notes. If you haven't already, make sure to check out Wrestling with Cards, the podcast, on all your favorite platforms for podcasts. It is an audio companion to these videos. So, I will give additional information that maybe I did not think of in the original video. So make sure to share that as well. Get the wrestling card community involved with that. Speaking of podcasts, another podcast I'm working with. Yes, that's right, two. Worlds Collide, featuring Tony Vella from WrestlingTradingCards.com, two YouTube card wrestling personalities talking all things wrestling cards. And if you really want to help support the show, make sure you check out Wrestling with Cards on Patreon. Links to all the stuff I've talked about are in the show notes. Patreon is a great way to help support the platform. You can have your opinions known. You can kind of steer the direction of the content. You can get exclusive behind-the-scenes footage and bonus content. So, like I said, links to all that are below in the show notes, but I've talked enough. Let's talk to Chuckster. All right, with me today, Chuckster. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, Zhan. Appreciate you having me on. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for taking the time to come on and enlighten everybody, because you're going to have a different perspective than some of my other guests I've had on so far. And that's the whole point of the show for these interviews, is to have different people doing different things, hopefully help out all the collectors out there. So for anybody unfamiliar with you, just give everybody a quick background of who you are and what you do.
Name's Chuck. Everybody knows me as Chuckster on all the wrestling boards and Twitter and everywhere else. I'm retired now, so I have a lot of time to spend with my collection. Been collecting since probably the early 80s, strictly wrestling. I don't go into other sports. I was into some pop culture stuff for a while. My first set when I was a kid, I started collecting the Batman stuff.
Cool.
The 66 Batman. I was into Spider-Man. I did the movie cards like Planet of the Apes. I did X-Files, the Beatles, the Monkees, Dark Shadows. I did all those. In the early 80s is when I really started getting into wrestling, and went to my first indie show with Sergeant Slaughter and the Moondogs. And after that, I thought, wow, I really like this. So I started looking around for some wrestling stuff. Actually, the first set of cards I bought was everybody's, I think, first set was the 87 Topps.
Yep, that was mine.
Once I hit wrestling cards, there was no looking back. The rest just kind of went. I was like, all the money I spent on this, no, it's going to go to wrestling. Not only did I do wrestling cards, I did action figures, I did magazines, anything that had a wrestling logo on it. This boy had it. Just recently, I sold my entire wrestling figure collection to a vintage store up in Philadelphia, and because I just couldn't afford to keep it anymore, and I just had nowhere to store it because I had moved, and I just didn't want it sitting in a storage unit forever and ever. Right. Just I wanted somebody to get something out of it, and it's time to move it on to newer collectors. I've had it for years. I've had my enjoyment out of it, so it's time to move on. Cards seem to be easier to collect, easier to store. Can't say easier to collect because right now with the prices climb, it's not so easy to collect anymore. But yeah, I've got just a little bit of everything from everywhere. So basically, I consider myself just a wrestling card, archivist and collector.
All right. So I told you before we started, I had some questions for you, but it could go off the rails right off the bat based on your responses, and that just opened up two more questions I didn't expect. So you said you used to collect other things, but mainly just wrestling now. Is there
Yeah.
is there still anything outside of wrestling of other collectible genres that you're into?
I would always go after Batman.
Okay.
Batman was my go-to superhero as a kid. When that first set came out in 1966 by Topps, there was a little store at the end of our street that sold them by the packs. Me and my friends would ride down on our bikes every couple of days and buy another pack. I put that first set together, pack at a time, at 8 years old.
That's awesome.
So that really that's my only other really collectible thing, because I just, like I said, being retired and not having the funds that I used to have when I was working, I had to kind of narrow my collecting stance, and so I just spend whatever money I have that I can on the wrestling industry right now.
Do you keep an eye on that old Batman stuff? I actually, right around Christmas time, bought a PSA 6 version of one of those Batman cards as a gift for somebody I knew that was a huge Batman fan. And it was very affordable, even in a slab. So do you know much about that market of that vintage Batman stuff?
I don't. I backed off on it a little bit. Occasionally I'll check eBay, but I just see the raw cards. I haven't seen any graded stuff on there. And again, they're still pretty affordable. But to me, it's the nostalgia thing, because when a kid, that was when Batman was starting to come out, and I was it was just fun. To me, it's just for the fun and the nostalgia of it. And but I don't really collect much of anything else anymore. Like I said, the wrestling magazines was a big deal. I still have my big collection of those. I had subscribed to the WWF magazine for years, got the whole entire card series out of them because I was getting them in the mail, because you didn't get them on the newsstand issue. It had to be, you had to subscribe to it to get the ones with the cards in them. And so I still have all those. WOW magazine, the WCW magazine, WWF magazine, when the Raw magazines, you name it, any like Pro Wrestling Illustrated and all their offshoots like Insider Wrestling. And there was just, I still have all my magazine collection. It's still in storage. I can't bring myself to let go of it, because there's so much wrestling history stored in those magazines, be it made up or real. It's just good stuff, good photos, good shots.
You mentioned the action figures, and this is something I used to be really into, and I'm kind of like you. I got rid of them for two reasons. One, space. You named it. The second reason I got rid of it is I actually saw more money, whether that's like retaining its value or just easier to make money selling lower end stuff because it's cheaper to ship them, on wrestling cards. And they're easier to store. So for me, I took that's, when I got started, I've told that story about spending $10 on a box of cards and then working my way up to the collection I have from there, minus, of course, what I had as a child or, odds and ends I bought along the way. And one thing I did is I took all of that money that I had in those wrestling those wrestling figures that I sold, and I was able to get some pretty good pieces. We see a lot of modern day wrestling fans still buying the figures, but aren't into the cards. We're still trying to crack the code on why a lot of those fans go for the figures and not the cards or something else. You've been in both worlds. Can you answer that or kind of expand on it?
The figures are really difficult to pinpoint. There's really only a few. I mean, the really popular ones are the ones that people go after. But when I was buying my figures, like a set would come out with a set usually had six figures in the set. If I was in a store and I wanted to buy just a Rock figure, I wouldn't buy just it. If it was series 1, I had to buy all 6 that belonged to it.
Right.
And that's how I collected. A lot of people don't do that now. It's very, people want just the Rock or just Stone Cold. They don't want all those little in-between ones. And they're kind of just sitting there gathering dust. It's the big stars that are bringing in the money. But why people would go after them instead of the card, it's beyond me. I've never figured that out either. The only thing I did like about that, and I kind of hated when I sold my collection, because I kept everything in the box or in the pack. A lot of those figures, especially the 2-packs, the grudge matches, had cards in them.
Oh yeah.
I wouldn't pull the cards out because that would ruin the value of the figures. So when the figures went, those cards went with them. I kind of regret that part of it, but I guess the figures, I guess it's just because the kids like to play with them a lot. And then once they're done with them, the adults splash onto them and think, oh, I can turn this over, flip it or whatever. But I just don't know the difference why they would collect a figure over the cards. I just can't put a finger on that.
I still think it would be cool. Like one of these days, I'm going to buy one of the base like Hogan LJN figures. I want to actually buy that in one of those graded encapsulation things, even if it's not in that graded condition, because I think it's still cool to own a few figures here and there. It's just, I'm sure you can relate when you've got them everywhere and it gets to the point where you can't do anything with them other than put them away in a tub or a box. You're like, what's the point? If it's going to take me forever to get to these, why should I have them? Might as well just fold those into something else,
Exactly. I had some old Remcos. They were out of the packs, but they were the really good, and they were in good shape. They had all the pieces to them, everything. And the card shop or the toy shop that I sold them all to, took them to a toy show here a couple weeks ago. They sold my rocker set for, I think it was like $275 out of the package. I mean, and so they're really still bringing in the money. That early stuff still bringing in the money. But the newer stuff just isn't, because there's Jakks Pacific got a hold of that license and they just did the same thing that Topps has done with the cards. They're just like overproduced. There's just so much of it out there, and I just couldn't keep up with it all. I had Beanie Babies, I had action figures, I had little die-cast cars. I had yo-yos with the wrestlers on it. I had if it had wrestling on it, I had it. It was in my collection. And when that guy come down, he called me. He said, well, I'm going to bring a van down to pick it all up. Do you think a van will be enough? I said, no,
better bring an 18-wheeler.
It was he brought a huge, an extra huge van. We just barely got it all in there. It was a 5x10 storage unit that he loaded up full of action figures. But he seems to be doing well and getting the money out of him. I've been keeping in touch with him. But to me, I'm like you. It's just so much easier to keep and store the cards. You just run out of space with the figures after a while. You just can't do it. And I think most of these people that are buying them are just flipping them. I don't think they're buying them and keeping them in their collection. I think they're buying them and flipping them.
Well, I see some people that are keeping them, but they're, I feel like when I see pictures of they posted, and this is how I felt too when I had action figures everywhere. I feel like I'm on an episode of Hoarders.
Uh-huh.
Like I'm just like, oh my gosh, there's too much stuff here. I can't do it. And I got to get rid of it.
I had a friend build a room in my house. We had a room in my house before I moved, and it was we referred to it as the wrestling room. I had a ring set up in the middle with all the figures, the loose figures in it. We built shelving all the way around, had the figures spaced out on the shelves. We took the drop ceiling out and put posters up where the drop ceiling would have been, so that there was like pictures on the ceiling. Awesome. It was an amazing room, and people would just come into that room. And there was a hole, I think, where you walked in the door for people where people's jaws would hit. Just kind of well, there's a hole. I better watch it. There, my jaw just hit the floor there. But people just was amazed at what I had. They'd say, "Oh yeah," he says he has some figures. I figured they thought they'd come in and they'd see all 10 or 12 figures. They walked in that room and they just walked out there shaking their head. It was just unbelievable.
You mentioned earlier that the Rockers figures sold for a couple $100, and I remember when I was really into wrestling figures, I was looking at those Rockers, and I would even see them, mint on card occasionally, and I'm like, oh, $1,000 for a figure. That's absurd. That's crazy. There's money to be made. Little did I know what the card market was going to do. And you talked about Topps overproducing their cards and stuff, but now you can find some stuff in Transcendent or some stuff in Fully Loaded where those cards like put these rare action figures to shame. And that's why I ended up going with the cards, because it's smaller, it's cooler. You could own a piece of, whatever they were wearing or the mat or whatever, and it's worth more. Just thought I'd throw that out there since we were talking about it.
Exactly. And that's when we were talking about cards and those more expensive end cards too. And we get talking about the autographs on them. You were talking about getting a piece of the swatch. For me, the autographs, I really like when they do the on-card autographs better, because to me, that gives me a connection with that particular character. They've actually held that card. They signed that card, as opposed to them just signing a whole page of stickers and then somebody else putting the stickers on the card. It gives a little more personal touch to it. So the cards themselves, I just really enjoy. but again, with tops overproducing and the price of the box skyrocketing these days, like I've talked to on another show too, I've kind of this year kind of cut back when the box breaks, because I would buy 2 or 3 boxes for every release and break them, and I just can't afford to do that. So what I'm going to do this year is I'm focusing more on the indie sets instead of buying the mass produced stuff, because you can buy them a dime a dozen now. Somebody puts it on the internet for $10 for the set.
Yeah, it's
I'll just
crazy.
pick it up that way, because I've got probably every autograph I need and every swatch card I ever need. Very few autographs that I don't have in my many years of collecting. I've got over 300 sets of cards. And we're talking not just the tops or the WWE, we're talking every WCW set put out, including the Peru set. I've got the Japanese, I've probably got 15 or 20 Japanese sets. I got a couple of sets from Germany. They're just so unique and so fun to go through. And a lot of people store their stuff and they get, oh, great, I got this set. I'll put it in the album. I'll put it on the shelf. They never look at it again. I'm a little different. About once or twice a week, I'll pull out a binder and I'll just flip through it. Like, oh, I forgot I had this. This is so cool. To me, it's all about just the fun and joy of collecting. I don't do it as a business. I don't do it. To me, it's just a hobby. It's my escape from real life for an hour or two every day. And I just do it to clear my mind and just to have fun and just concentrate on that one little area of collecting. So, but the cards are just really a fun way to do it. I was watching one of your shorts here about a week or so ago. You did one on the ice cream bar cards.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of a set that I have been building for years, and I'd love to actually finalize that in the next year or two. I don't think it'll ever happen because they're so hard to get, but especially for some reason, the earlier stuff was easier to get than the later stuff. The stuff that Unilever put out is so much harder to find these days. The Gold Bond and the Good Humor, they're a little easier to track down, and they ended up putting like 17 sets of them out.
Oh, I didn't realize there's that many sets. Yeah,
there's 17 now. You could say 17, but technically it's 16, because in 2002, when WWF lost the rights to use WWF and became WWE, they had put out the set with WWF for 2002. Then they re-released the exact same cards with the WWE logo. So set 13 and 14 or I think it's 12 and 13 or 13, 14. I'm not sure which two it is, but they're the identical set. Just the difference is the logo on them. And they were such a fun set to collect. I mean, just all of them were. And Gold Bond and Good Humor actually started making specific sets based on, I'm trying to think of the word I want to use. Like, for instance, one set they put out, it was all what they call the toughest opponent. So they'd have a wrestler and they would say who their toughest opponent was. One set was all the wrestlers' catchphrases. That was a pretty neat set. One was the New Generation, which is one of my favorite sets because it was bright, it was colorful, it was fun. It was back when Bret Hart and Diesel and all those were the big deal. And those were fun sets to collect. And to this day, that's kind of the one I still gravitate to try to find pieces every now and then. They're just drying up though a lot right now, but they were a fun set to collect. And when you had that little video on last week or so, I thought, oh, this is so cool. You know, somebody remembers these.
Asked me about that and asked me about kind of, rare, obscure food product like oddball wrestling cards. So, I like to cover that stuff to kind of get that information out there. So that's even more information. So whoever asked that question, there you go. There's more information. So one of the biggest reasons, this is the main topic of the show, I wanted to have you on because you are unlike most other people I know in any kind of hobby space, as you're primarily a set collector. Most set collectors I know are from baseball, actually. I don't even see another sports people collecting complete sets. So out of everything that you collect and when you start collecting, what made you want to go down the road of, hey, I just want sets. I want complete sets. That's what I'm focused on.
Just my OCD. I got to have everything. if I had a set, if I had a card that was, if the set was numbered 1 to 50 and card 39 was missing, that would drive me nuts until I had it. So if I was going to buy a set, or if I was going to buy a card from a set, just buy, like I was telling you with the figures, how I wouldn't buy just one figure. I'd have to buy all 6 of it long. Same with the wrestling cards. I couldn't buy just The Rock or just Steve Austin or just Hogan. I had to have, if I bought that Hogan card from the Topps 87, then I had to have the entire 87. And I was, in the beginning, a completist. I had to have everything that belonged to that set. As the years have come by, being a completist has become obsolete. You can't do it anymore because of so many parallels, so many insert sets, so many autographs and swatches. You just can't be a completist anymore. So I have tried to just force myself to get just the base set. And if there's a couple inserts to it, I'll buy the insert sets. And then the rest of it, I just kind of leave alone and say, hey, I've completed it. I just kind of got to lie to myself in the head a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, but I just have to have it all. I just like the cards. I just like to have those sets. They're just, and with like over 300 sets in my collection, you can imagine how overwhelming that could be. We were talking about storing figures. I mean, obviously storing cards is a little easier, but still, that's a lot of binders and a lot of top loaders. And a lot of,
yeah, that's actually one thing we're going to touch on here in a minute is how you store things, because I've actually switched to a binder method for a player collection I have with basketball cards, and I think that would be helpful to everyone as well and other set collectors out there. And I'm guessing this is one reason why you're buying more indie stuff now, is because when you buy it, you get the whole set right there, and there's not as many chase or parallels.
Exactly. That was a point I wanted to bring up. You nailed it. But because if I buy a set, bam, I've got it. I'm a completist again.
Right.
I complete that set. And there's so many new ones out right now that are so impressive that have current stars before they were stars. Like, for instance, the Joey Janela sets, Spring Break 3 Joey Janela sets 1 and 2. I mean, they've got MJF, they've got Sammy Guerrero, they've got most of the AEW stars on there. They got Jungle Boy. They've just got a lot of the stars that are just now starting to get national recognition. They were popular on the indie scene for years. I knew of a lot of them, but a lot of people didn't, unless you're a really hardcore fan.
Right.
But I followed the indies too, through magazines and through online sites and things like that. So when these guys started popping up on cards, it's like, wow, I can get, everybody thinks this AEW set's going to have their rookie cards in. No, it's not. To me,
here we go again with that debate.
We're not going to even get into that.
It never ends.
That's a long discussion. It'll never have I like what Tony come up with. Have first card. Call it just the first card.
First card. Yeah. But then you get into that debate of, well, is this? I'll take. I actually was doing writing some notes for another show coming up when I was talking about Brian Pillman. So yeah, you have this first card, which is technically that 1990 Slamorama board game card, but it's not his first pack pullable card. But it's technically neither one of those are his first card, because he had that football card in 1986. So I mean,
exactly. Yeah, and you can do the same thing with The Rock, and you can do the same thing with Tammy Fitch when she was her cheerleader days, and there's just a lot. And of course, my current favorite that I'm trying to chase down, obviously, Thunder Rosa. Everybody knows I'm a big Thunder Rosa fan. Trying to chase down her cards. I found a couple, but they're really difficult. And I'll never, ever find what the true rookie is on that one, I guess, either. But
So are you
my favorites?
Are you mainly doing just the base sets, or are you chasing also subsets and insert sets?
I'm chasing the inserts. I just don't do parallels anymore. Parallels have gone boom. If I, like, for instance, if you have a base set and say there's a insert set of 10 cards and another insert set of 20, I'll buy those inserts to complete what I call a mini master instead of a master set. Master set, you got everything.
Right.
A mini master is just one of just the base and the inserts. I'm not going after the parallels. I'm not going after the inserts. I'm not going after the autographs, those things like that. But yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing. And then I just got to say, good, I'm done, and move on, because there's so much out there and I don't want to miss it.
I'm wondering if a lot of these companies are starting to make parallels and different variations for more player collectors or people? Well, I like player collecting more, and I also like having the one or two high-end pieces as opposed to having the whole base set. Now, it's no offense to you. I'm just wondering if they're trying to maybe like appease both sides, possibly.
That's a really good thought. Yes, I would never thought of it that way, but you're right, because I've got a couple friends of mine that they only collect certain players, like some will only collect Hogan.
Right.
I know a friend of mine that only does Charlotte Flair. I just heard recently of a woman that's a female actually collector who's doing the McMahon family.
Oh, that's cool. What a great collection.
Yeah. And so I can see them making the one of ones to appease the set collectors. That's cool. Unfortunately, I just kind of sit back and drool sometimes. Gee whiz, if I could get that, then I could go after all the other.
Yeah, but the thing is, if people will follow you on Twitter, which guys, go follow him on Twitter. We'll put the link to his profile in the show notes. But some of the cards you show that are you just happen to have are like the cards that everybody wants. So that's one of the things about set collecting that's good, is you've always got that stuff, but the thing is, you don't ever sell anything either, do you?
Now, if I have duplicates, yes. If I have duplicates, and believe me, I have tons of duplicate base sets, tons from TNA and more current WWE, like from 2000 up. The earlier stuff, it's been pretty much rated. The 87s and below, all those pretty much gone. But but like just about every TNA set, I have duplicates of about just about everything from about 2010 maybe on up. I have duplicates of. And yeah, I sell them cheap. Just I don't want to play the market and say, oh my God, I got this set, but make an offer. $50? No, that's not enough. I don't do that. I want them out there because I've got them. They're just going to sit there in my house collecting dust if I don't do anything with them. So yeah, I'll sell them pretty cheap.
Yeah, and then you can take that money if you wanted and parlay it into the pieces you don't have. That's my favorite thing to do with it.
That's exactly what I do with it. Exactly what I do with it. So, and that way it kind of keeps, I have that little income coming into my PayPal account that I can just flip over onto something that I see coming in. And, but again, like I said, it's just, I've really been focusing more on the indies this year, but there's a couple of sets that I'm trying to finish up from past years. Number one is obviously the ice cream bar cards. I'll still always chase those. There's one card from the 2010 Platinum set that I'm really after, which is a blue parallel of Kelly Kelly, because the 2010 Platinum and the 2015 Undisputed, I liked so well that I actually did chase the parallels. And so I have like all the green parallel of the 2010. I have all but one of the blue, and I'm almost done the gold. And that will complete my 2010. And on the 2015 Undisputed, I've got all three parallels completed. So I was pretty proud of that. I didn't go after the one of ones, obviously, because I knew I would never complete those. But all the ones that were numbered to like 50 or 199, 50, and 25, I believe they were. I've completed all those. So
something that's interesting too, that time period, that 2010 era, give or take a few years, seems like really dead time for wrestling cards. Like of all the times I can think of, even in the mid 90s when I was growing up, like I would still see wrestling cards, but man, during that time period when Topps took over and there was, you had TNA stuff out, but like, I don't know. I couldn't find it as much. And even when I found it, it was like marked down. Nobody wanted it. Did you see that same thing? Maybe that had to do with the on-screen product too, which you could say the same thing about right now, potentially.
Mm-hmm. But I would pick it up if it was marked down, or I'd go on eBay and somebody'd say, oh, I just put together my set. I have all these extras left over in a lot here. Here's the lot for $20 or whatever. I would go in and buy it, whether I needed it or not, because I figured once I got enough, maybe I could put together another set, pass it on, send it out.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I would buy the lots, and that was always a fun thing to do, and but the TNA stuff,
people complain about not being able to find the product now, like what you just said, buying lots and buying collections. That's one of the most fun things that I like to do, because it's the hunt. You never know what's going to be in there when you buy it.
I bought a collection. Oh, it's probably been 10 years now, but some woman had an eBay auction on there. She said $75 or best offer. My son went away to college. I have these binders of his wrestling cards, whoever makes the best offer, whatever. So I put the best offer, and I got it for like $75, $80. I can't remember. I got 2 big boxes full of binders that showed up on my doorstep, and I opened it up. There was 83 All-Stars, 82 All-Stars. There was Animotion from over in Italy. There was tons of old stuff. And like when I pulled out Andre the Giant All-Stars card out of there, I said, well, I just made my money back. It's just, and I can just see her son coming home from college in a couple of months. Mom, what'd you do with all the wrestling cards? Sold it for $75.
Yeah, let's hope he doesn't see this now.
So that was pretty neat. I made out pretty good on that deal. That was good. That was a good buy.
So you just mentioned binders. We've talked about some top loaders. We've talked about 300 plus sets. What is the best way you found as far as how to store your cards, and then we can kind of break down those individually?
I do binders. The only time I use a top loader or a little heavier duty one is if I have a really extremely rare one that I don't want any damage to get to. I mean, I don't want to damage any of them, but there's some that are like my rock autograph that I have from Duo Cards, Comic Images. That's in a magnetized sealed thing. But mostly I just put them in binders, and I do them by company and by year. And like, for instance, all the TNA stuff are in binders together from the 2004. And then in the order that they were released, I have them in the binders. And like all the 2008 sets are together, all the 2009 sets are together, and so on. Now, when I got up into the top stuff, because they seem to be releasing the same sets every year anymore, like Road to WrestleMania comes out every year. The SummerSlam series comes out every year. There was just the regular 2009 set, 2010 set, their basic set come out every year. So I kind of broke those down. Like I have binders with all the Road to WrestleMania 2014, 2015, 2006. I have all the Road to WrestleManias together. I have all the Undisputeds together. I have all the SummerSlams together. I have all the yearly releases together. And then when it comes down to just oddball, they just release one set per year. Then I have a separate binder that I'll do again by year. I break it down by year. So, and then of course I have on the side of the binder, I have everything that's in the binder. So I can just go to the shelf and pull it down and hunt it out. I do separate out my autograph cards, my swatch cards, and my MAC cards into separate binders. All the WWE, WWF/E autographs go in one binder. TNA autographs go in a separate binder. Then there's a separate binder for the MAC cards for both, a separate binder for swatch cards in both, like a TNA swatch, a WWE swatch, a TNA MAC binder, and a WWE MAC binder, and so forth. So I keep all them separated. But I also,
your OCD is really kicking in to have them all right together.
It does. I got to know where to find it. It's horrible.
I love it. I'm doing a similar thing with a Shaquille O'Neal and Dennis Rodman collection I just started, and I do the same thing when I'm lining things up on display. They may not be in a binder, but I totally get it.
Yeah, I got to have it. And then what really bothers me too is I'm a big fan, which I'm probably sure you're aware if you followed me for any length of time, big fan of the Tops Now stuff that they do, the online stuff. And they did it the same thing with the NXT. And on the NXT line, they have misnumbered. They have skipped numbers.
Nuts.
That has driven me insane, because if it goes to card number 5 and then it jumps up to card number 7, there's no 6 ever made. And it's like, I want a 6. It's I have to put them in the binder, and I have to leave an open spot in case a 6 ever does crop up, which I know it won't, because I've been keeping track of it ever since they started. But yeah, I'm kind of wound up when it comes to knowing what I have.
Yeah, Topps' quality control lately has just been terrible.
It has. And they didn't even release the Elimination Chamber was Sunday night. Usually Monday by noon, the 4 or 5 cards from that pay-per-view will be online. They're not there. There is no Elimination Chamber card. So did they do away with it? Are they not going to put it out? Are they going to wait until Fastlane? Are they going to wait till WrestleMania for the next set? Or did they just do away with it? Don't know.
It's not a good way to, keep the wrestling cards are on fire now. We all know that.
Mhm.
And then here you have like the sole proprietor of WWE cards, and they're not even telling people what they're doing. It's not a good
And
look.
on their main website, there's usually a drop down menu in the upper left hand corner that lists all what they have, like WWE or soccer or Star Wars, whatever. They've taken the WWE out of their drop down list.
Oh,
But they're still doing the living stuff. So
I'm wondering if they're transitioned, if they're only going to keep one going and just go to the living instead of the now.
It's possible, because they just recently started this moment in WWE history also, which is an ongoing set, and they're still selling those too. So, but they just restarted their tops now for a 5th series with the Royal Rumble cards, number 1 through 5 just came out for the Royal Rumble for this year. So why would they release 5 and then stop doing it? Why didn't they just stop at the first of the year if they were going to stop it? Yeah. So nobody seems to know. We're all just keeping our eye on the site and going in every day and checking it out, seeing what's going on.
So you mentioned binders. This is pretty important. I've recently found some binders I think work really well. You've been doing this longer than me. So what kind of binders do you use if you use a specific kind? And what's your best advice on storing them? Because Tony Vella's talked about this before. A lot of times on the binders, you stand them up so you can see what's on them. But a lot of times the pages on the bottom row of those cards get bent. Do you have any suggestions on how to prevent that, or basically the best way to store those binders if you're using traditional binders?
I'm using the traditional with like the D rings on them so that Yep. But I stand most of mine up. I've never really had any issues with damage on them. If they're a real heavy card, those I get concerned about. I'll lay them on their side, but kind of like this. I lay them like this.
If you get, do you stack? Have you ever stacked the binders, and does that do any damage if you lay them flat?
Yeah, no, it don't, because I cross, like for instance, the back will be here on this one, the back will be here on this one.
I got you.
Because they slant, obviously. So like if I got 2 binders like that.
Okay. And you have, of all these years, you haven't found any damage doing it that way?
No, absolutely not. Now I have seen some pages sag. This isn't cards, by the way. This is just a notebook full of papers. But
still.
But if I'll stand them up, if I notice they're going to start drooping, like towards the bottom, then that's going to be one that's going to go on the side. But I don't stack the binders that full, so they're not going to. I've just never really had any damage. I know some people have said that they have, and I keep an eye on it. I haven't really had any issues with it. I think it might have been you or somebody I saw had a binder that now zips closed.
Yeah, Tony's got one and I got one, but we both have different ones. The ones I've started using are called Z Folios, and they are fantastic. Like you can, they're double. They have like this, that like soft felt finish kind of thing, and your cards slide in from the side. So if you tip them up and down, they can't go anywhere, and then it zips up. My only problem is I've got these cubes I store vinyl records in, and that's what I was going to store my binders in. These binders are like this big. They're so tall you can't fit them in there. So I'm trying to find a solution to that. But they're the best binders I ever had. But they're also $25, $30 a piece. Now they have all the pages in them, and they don't use a D ring, so it's really nice. And I think you can store like 300-400 cards per binder. So it's still pretty good, but yeah, it's just something interesting I started looking at.
That might be something I might be looking into. But at $25 a pop, and I've got over 70 binders, that would be, to me, that would be.
It's an investment.
Be deep pockets, yeah, when I've already got it. Yeah.
So you got all these binders, which we'll both agree is the best way, I think, to look at sets, because if you just got them in a box, it's too hard to go through. So you got all these binders. And most people are probably thinking, well, you just got them put away, whatever. Like, how often are you getting these out and looking through them? Because that's part of the fun of collecting, even if you're not buying new stuff.
Once or twice a week.
That's great.
I pick a different thing each week, because and I think my renewed interest came when I joined Twitter, because there were so many. That's just such a wide. I wasn't expecting the wide response I was getting on Twitter. I was used to doing just message boards and Facebook with a couple of friends. And when I joined Twitter, it just, wow, I wasn't expecting this. And people got to talking about this card or that card, or asking me about this or that. And so I figured, well, I do know my stuff, but I've lost a lot of things because I've got so much stuff. Like I've forgotten about this or I've forgotten about that. So when I see a discussion thread start up, I'll dig out that binder and I'll go through it and I'll look through it so that when I jump into the conversation, I'm not sounding like a dummy. I kind of, they did this with that, or they did this with this. And so I've really enjoyed doing that. And also like I've told you, I've dealt with Tony for several years. Another site that I deal with too is Paul up in Canada. He has the wrestling card price guide. I've become one of his kind of contributors. He kind of counts on me for the Tops Now and the NXT Now stuff, and I help him with the independent stuff. So he's done a really good job, just kind of logging what's out there too. Because Tony had kind of, when he had got away from it about 2015, 2016, and Paul just kind of wanted to keep it going until Tony and David could get that going again. And so between he and I, we've kind of listed things that are still out there. We haven't checklisted everything, but we listed what's available, and it's a pretty good resource for finding out what's out there. You might not know everything that's in the set, but at least you'll know that set's out there and what to look for. So, but
so I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here. Out of all the sets you have, what's your favorite 3 base sets?
What's my 3 favorite base? Definitely the 2010 Platinum, 2015 Undisputed, and obviously just because it was my first
1987 Tops.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not necessarily in that order, but those are
right.
If you want to pick my top 3, has to be those.
I've talked about it before. I've got one 1987. Well, I've got a few. I have a couple complete sets, I think, but I have the one card that says "Listening to Hulkamania." I don't remember the card number, but it's got Hogan cup in his ear, and I've had that card since I was 4 years old. I got it. I was born in '84, and I got it in '88, and I still have it.
You were born right about the time WrestleMania was just starting up.
Yep. That's why I'm hooked. All it took was Hulkamania and just going from there. So
I was sitting in a bar watching WrestleMania 1. They would have closed circuit TV. And before pay-per-view come out, they would have closed circuit TVs. Certain hotels and bars would actually get the rights to show it, and you would just pay to get into the lobby of the hotel or the bar or whatever, and you could watch the WrestleMania. That's how I saw my first 2 or 3 WrestleManias. And when you were talking about the food cards too, another one that's two others that's kind of interesting. Circle K.
Oh yeah.
You're familiar with the Circle K. They were kind of neat. Most people have them with the cards, but a lot of people don't have, which I do, is the card actually had a scratch off game on the bottom of it. And I have the entire set with the scratch offs not scratched off.
Awesome.
And that was a pretty cool set to get. I just like the look of those because that was right around the era that I started getting into wrestling, because it had like Hogan and Hercules and Heenan and all those good guys. And the other one, which is kind of neat, it's a really odd offbeat food product, and I think I might have seen it on one of your shows too. The little Borden's sticker cards that come in bags of chips.
Yep.
Back in my hanging out at the corner bar days, when you're pounding them back, you got to have that taste for salt. Well, there was, give me a bag of those old chips, or give me a bag of those popcorn over there. And no, give me that one there. It has a sticker in it. I would just sit there and kind of wipe out the bar on all their just to get their little stickers out of it. I was hardcore in that.
That's actually more product I have from when I was a kid. I think I got those from one of my parents that saved them for me, but there's just a handful of stuff that I somehow still have from when I was, 3-4 years old. And it's just amazing that I still have it. Last question. This could maybe be short, a little bit longer, kind of depends on how you take it. Where do you see wrestling cards as far as the market, whether it's money, whether it's popularity, mainstream? Where do you see wrestling cards going in the next few years?
Nothing but up, because all of the really good stuff that's out right now is starting to dry up. Most specifically, the Fleer, and the Fleer product is amazing. I love when they had the license. They just did some amazing stuff, and I don't see the current Tops stuff doing that, but I do see like the Fleer stuff doing it, and some of the offbeat Panini stuff and things like that, I see them going through the roof. But the current product right now, I think it's just going to kind of, the market is just so flooded with the new top stuff that I don't see them going anywhere unless somebody is a really, really big breakout star, and and people start gobbling up that particular one card out of that set, and then everybody's thinking, oh my God, I can get the whole set, but I can't find that one card.
Right.
That might be an issue, but I don't see the current tops product really taking off. But I do see up until about Fleer, up until the Fleer years, I see them going through the roof, and especially that the Royal Rumble set from 2002.
Yeah.
I mean, with all the rookies that they have in there, and the dual swatches that they have in there, it's just gonna be through the roof. And I actually see some of the indie stuff going really crazy. One set that's still available right now, I got it at High Spots, and it's only like $10. And there's not that many cards in it, but it's a set dedicated to Bruiser Brody.
Mm-hmm.
And it's put, his wife Barbara was very instrumental in getting that put out, and I think they made like 2,000 sets of it,
which is really nothing in the grand scheme of things.
Exactly. And I see that set actually kind of taking off, because Brody was at least for me, Brody was kind of
I love Brody.
And so I liked a lot of those old school wrestlers. I mean, my favorite wrestler of all time, Nature Boy Buddy Rogers.
There you go. There's an old school.
Rogers is my really old school go-to guy. When it comes to the newer stuff, I mean, I like some of the new guys, but you got. I mean, I just loved an almost pure wrestling match, a collar elbow, hook up, the takedowns, the reversals. That's what got me into wrestling to begin with. And I see those guys' cards taking off, like the Imagine stuff already is now, and they had like 6 or 8 autograph cards from the Imagine set.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an all black and white set. From what I understand, Bruno Sammartino was pretty instrumental in getting those guys to sign those cards.
Interesting.
I had heard that he had taken them to those guys and say, hey, we're putting this set together. I need you to sign these cards, need you to sign these cards. So I thought that was a little bit of info. I don't know how true it is, but that's what I've heard. And why doubt it? It's a good story. If it's not true, it's still a good story.
It's amazing the stories that you can uncover from cards when you start digging in. Speaking of digging in, that you just led to 2 more questions I want to ask. Do you think the whether it's the current we'll say modern wrestling fans are buying the t-shirts, buying the wrestling figures, not buying the cards, etc., do you think no matter what company it is, the reason some of these cards aren't skyrocketing like popular sports or popular like Pokemon, stuff like that, the popularity, the prices of modern wrestling aren't exploding like those things? Do you think that has anything to do with the on-screen in-ring product?
Probably. I'm not real. I still watch it faithfully, but right now I'm not a fan of it. But I still watch it because I watched it when it was good. I'm not a fair weather friend or a fair weather fan. Now, I liked it when it was good. It'll be good again. And maybe one day, one of those guys that's in there now is going to, down the road, he's going to take off. But yeah, I don't see people wanting, and there's a few, I won't mention any names because if I do, somebody will jump on me. Why don't you like that wrestler? I was going to say there was one particular wrestler I was going to name, but I'm not going to because I'm not going to get my throat torn off.
Yeah.
But, people down the road are just going to say, oh, I didn't buy any of his stuff. I don't like him. But then 10 years down the road, oh man, I should have bought him. But, and that could happen. It's going to happen.
And that leads into the next question. So let's say they love wrestling. People love wrestling. WWE Network's out there. YouTube's out there. So you've got everything from, your mainstream Saturday night main event on the network to like weird blood and guts Puerto Rico stuff with Bruiser Brody and Abby in it. You got all this history of wrestling. Do you think people maybe would start going back and looking at, 60s, 70s, 80s wrestling that is a little bit more obscure or not as well known as what the WWE likes to publicize? And it's not the, Monday Night Wars. Do you think people will go back and look at that stuff and start finding the cards that correlate with that at all? Like, for example, let's just say the All-Stars Pat Patterson, like everybody knows him, but they didn't know he's a wrestler. Same thing with Brody or like Kerry Von Erich. A lot of those cards are only popular to the diehards. Do you see the mainstream wrestling fans kind of picking up on that, or do you think they're mainly just looking at going forward?
I think they're just looking at it and then moving on, because once they grow up, most of the people are just getting away from it. I would hope that some of them would stick with it and start doing the research and looking back, because there's some pretty awesome stuff. When you mentioned Patterson, the first IC champion, quote, in Puerto Rico, but there's some really, really good old school stuff out there. And right now, as much as I enjoy watching some of the athleticism in the ring right now, I still miss the days of let's just beat the crap out of this guy. Get in the corner and just boom, boom,
Yep.
And you had like Lou Thez, and you had Buddy Rogers, and you had, just so many of those great old Killer Kowalski, and he had the claw, that was Baron von Raschke. I'm sorry, with the claw. And these guys were just really fun to watch, and they were brutal. I was at a indie show that had Terry Funk and Abdullah the Butcher.
Yikes.
And Abby picked up a trash can and bashed it over Terry, and Terry was bleeding, and he was laying on the floor, and some woman in the stands who was really marking out, she's like, "Oh my God, somebody call the police. He's going to murder him." I mean, she was freaking out. It's like, lady, it's entertainment.
Sounds like a modern internet wrestling fan complaining about it.
Exactly. So, to me, that was a fun match. I knew what it was, and I knew it was, I knew everything was going to be okay in the end. But those were the kind of matches that I don't want to see that in every match.
Right.
But I'd like to see it. I'm kind of looking forward to seeing what Kenny Omega and John Moxley does with this exploding barbed wire death match. I remember the Terry Funk and Mick Foley one from Japan. I have that on tape somewhere still this day. That was an amazing match. So I think if they look back, and I think people are seeing the shows today and thinking, wow, this is really something compared to the old stuff. If they go back and watch some of the old school, they're going to think, wow, really? They did that? And that could be the one match that sparks the interest in somebody to start collecting and start, I just want to see some of the younger collectors start getting into it a little more. I mean, and again, like I touched on base on, I think on one of Tony's shows, it seems to be a very male dominated hobby right now. I'd like to see a lot more of the female, because the women now are starting to actually wrestle.
Yeah. And they're doing a good job.
Yeah. So the TNA stuff, I mean, Becky Lynch, Charlotte Flair, Rhea Ripley, just so many, Shayna Baszler. I mean, these girls really, women have really taken it and shown what they can do with it, and show what the females can do with this sport too. And they've just really, nothing's going to beat that Becky Lynch and Charlotte Flair free for all they had a couple years ago. I think it was Revolution. That's the one that just said, wow, okay, these two girls are it, And so if the girls can see, kind of watch these women, think, wow, there's actually some good women. Maybe we'll start collecting the women's cards. I don't know, something to spark the interest. And
the thing with wrestling, like you've got wrestling, you've got WNBA, and you've got women's UFC. That's like the three off the top of my head women's products that I can think. So that's a good sign for the wrestling cards, I think, for if we can get more females involved.
Yeah, definitely.
Something else about wrestling cards I just want to touch on. In my opinion, wrestling cards are one of the easiest gateways to get your base information on wrestling history. You get a moment in time, you get a bio on the back. I mean, prime example of those 82, 83 All-Stars, if you guys aren't familiar, read some of the bios on the back of those. The stories that they're telling about these guys before they're even big time. I'll just use Hogan, for example, or Ted DiBiase. There's another one that you can, it's just amazing to look at that. You also mentioned the Foley Terry Funk. I have one of the, I have a PSA 9 I actually bought from David Peck of the 95 BBM Cactus Jack card where he's got the barbed wire and blood on him and stuff. When I look at that card, it sends me back to that match, and it represents, that was my introduction to death matches. And, I've kind of gone in and out of whether I love or don't like death matches since then. My tastes kind of changed throughout the years, but it's amazing. That's what cards do, is they represent a time, a history, a memory, nostalgia, all of that wrapped up together. Do you have
Yeah.
any final words on wrestling cards before we get out of here?
Collect, everybody. Just get into it. Collect what you like. Again, like I've heard so many times, there's no wrong way to collect. Collect what you want, what you like, how you like, but just collect. The more people know about this, the more fun the hobby is going to be. The more people you're going to meet, because you're going to get on these boards and these chat rooms, and you're going to be able to talk to other collectors and find out things. So, I just think that the hobby in itself, it's growing by leaps and bounds right now, and I don't want to see it stopping. But again, like me, I'm 62 years old. I've had my day in the sun. We need some more younger collectors coming in and helping a little bit too, and there's still people like me around that's willing to help, willing to answer questions, willing to see what I can do to help. But just learn about it. It's just so fun, and it's just a good escapism. It's good nostalgia. So just collect however you want to collect and what you want to collect.
And one other thing I'll throw in, you just touched on, since I started putting out content and getting a lot more involved with social media a year ago, or whatever, the wrestling card community is some of the most fun and helpful people of any of the card communities that I've ever been a part of. And speaking of that, let everybody know where they can find you, follow you, and check out all of your collection.
The only place I'm really good on right now is Twitter under the Chuckster, or I have just signed up with Discord.
Yep.
And I'm also under Chuckster on Discord. So those are the two places that I post. I don't do Facebook on that. Facebook is mostly for my family and friends collection. Twitter is for my wrestling, and so is my Discord. So you can check me out there, hit me up. Any questions you got, I'll be glad to try to help you out.
Chuckster, thanks for joining us today and giving us your time. And thanks for all the collecting over the years that allowed that information to come to light. So thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for asking me, Zhan.
Thanks for watching, everybody. See ya. Thanks again to Chuckster for coming on the show. I hope everybody that watched this learned something. I try to get people from all walks of life of trading cards to give a variety to the space. I may even look at some people who aren't necessarily as into wrestling cards, but can give you some solid information on collecting or how to get good deals or just other aspects of collecting that you could relate to wrestling. And you may learn some other stuff along the way, and all of a sudden, hey, I'm interested in this other space this person is in. Maybe I should start collecting or looking into that. So I just like to keep a variety, and I hope you guys are enjoying that and can kind of see the logic behind that. If you enjoyed this video, hit that subscribe button, give me a thumbs up. Make sure to share this all over all of the social platforms. Let's get as many people in the wrestling community, whether they're action figure collectors, video game collectors, anybody that loves wrestling, send them to this channel. Let's get them involved. Make sure you click on the screens to check out even more videos with great wrestling card content. I'll see you on the next one.